Welcome back to Root Sacred. This is my story time of how I entered in spirituality. The woman with no peace chose life. So when we ended off part 2, I talked about heading to Chicago to receive my reading. Because when I started, I was told that Yemoja was my head Orisha and that I needed to set up an altar to her. But um, after one catastrophic mistake, I needed to have it done the proper way, and which was to head to Chicago and get a reading. So this is me traveling to Chicago. Now, at this time, I had asked my doctor to switch me from him to a female doctor. And so he sent me to an East Asian um, female doctor. She found the cause of my high blood pressure, which was pulmonary hypertension. And so that pretty much means that the ventricles and the blood vessels in my heart are very narrow and blood has a hard time getting through. And um, she wanted to put me on more medications. Some of the medication that she put me on did get rid of my headache, but it did not bring the high blood pressure down. As for her, she could not find the source of my bleeding. She couldn't do it. So she told me to head um, to this clinic that did a whole lot of different testing. And so they tested me for everything. They tested me for everything except for what I actually had. And so when everything came back, she said, "We can't explain why you are pooling blood in your body." And I said, "Well, what am I supposed to do? How?" Because I have to work. I can't just lay around. And she was like, "Well, you know, um, all I can do is send you to an OBGYN." And I said, "Well, let's do that." And so she said, "Well, I'll give you a referral to my colleague. He's very good." I said, "I do not want a man. Please send me to a black woman." And this isn't a knock against other doctors, but the reality is that everything that a black woman is going through in her body, it is always brushed off. Um, and so I said, "Please give me a black woman, someone that can relate to what I'm going through and feel what I'm feeling." So in the beginning of 2019, I met my female doctor, and she was actually the daughter of the doctor who delivered my two babies. And so she, when I met her in February of 2019, she said that she was going to, run all these different tests to try to get some answers. And I said, "Okay." And so she did a whole lot of tests. Um, I remember her coming back in March and saying that I had polyps. This was the first that we had gotten some answers. She said I had polyps that were around my uterus, not inside, but around my uterus. And I said, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" She said, "Well, we're going to test it and see if it's malignant or benign." And that pretty much means cancerous or non cancerous. And I said, "Okay." And so I remember going in for that procedure. And this is in late March, the middle of March, because my daughter's birthday was in April. So this was in the middle of March that I had um, underwent this procedure. And she came back and said that the test had came back inconclusive. And that pretty much means that it didn't come back one way or another if it was cancerous or non-cancerous. And so she said, we're going to have to take a much larger sample. And I said, okay. So I want to say about a week later, I went in to have the test done again. They took a much larger sample. They sent me home. When they sent me home, I bled. I bled like a stuffed animal. Um, and it was coming nonstop. So I had to be taken back to the hospital, put into ICU. Um, and they kept me in there. When she got the test back, um, it came back cancerous. And not only did it come back cancerous, it came back as progressive. So if they had caught it earlier, I probably wouldn't have had as many surgeries as I had. But she said that the polyps were doubling. So not only were they around the uterus, they were starting to attach themselves to the lining of my stomach. And so I stayed in the hospital until the week of my daughter's birthday, which was April 2nd. I was in the hospital. So I did not get a chance to celebrate and bring in her birthday the way we normally would bring in her birthday. Um, but they went in and they took as many of the polyps out as they could. They just kept coming back. They would take them out and they would come back and they would come back bigger and a lot more stronger. And she was a wonderful doctor. And she couldn't explain it. She was like, I don't understand. She was like, we are scraping your cervix and your womb every other month. And they keep coming back. They're coming back bigger and stronger. And so 2019, I headed to Chicago in July. I headed to Chicago because I needed answers. Because I'm like, at this point, nothing's making sense. So I set up the meeting with the Babalawo, and he was amazing. I met him and I met his whole family. They had food, they had drinks. The atmosphere was welcoming. And when I sat down before the tray, I was just like, why is it so peaceful? And he told me before even talking to me, he said, I'm not going to beat around the bush with you. No matter what this reading says, you need to act. Otherwise, you're on borrowed time. So we did the reading. The reading came back that Yemoja was not my accompanying Orisha, right? And a lot of people, when they get into this tradition, they are misled by a couple of things. They are misled to believe that there is a particular Orisha that governs your head. Yes, yes, there is a particular Orisha that governs your head, but it's not the Orishas that we have become accustomed to knowing or learning about. It's only one, and that's your inner consciousness. We call it our Ori, but it's really your inner self. Your higher self is your governing Orisha. That is the only Orisha that can sit on top of your head. And so he told me that my governing Orisha, the Orisha that walks with me and accompanies me on my journey, because he said, first of all, everybody's vying for you. everybody loves you. Everybody wants you. He said, so, but the one that's the loudest is Oya. And I said, okay. You don't know about Oya. She's the mother of nine. She's the mother of the wind. She's Shango's partner and everything that he does in the pantheon. She's always there with him. And so he said, she is your governing Orisha. She's accompanying you. He said, but you're also accompanied by Oshun, Shango, Aje, and Eshu. And he said, the more you learn, the more they're all going to accompany you because they all want you. They all want to be with you. And I said, okay. Again, I didn't know. I was still learning and still trying to figure things out. And so when that happened, I was just like, okay, this is a good thing. And he was like, yes, it's a very good thing. He was like, you are a rare breed. You are one of a kind to have all of these Orishas wanting to vie for you. He said, so you should feel honored. And I said, well, I do. I truly do. I truly do feel honored. And so he gave me a whole list of things that I was supposed to stop doing. And this is when, for me, because we're all going to have that moment of when life is throwing you chaos, you're going to start finding that center. And in that moment, I found my center. I found what I needed and what I was looking for. And so, um, he told me, he said, well, Ya's your mother. I said, well, how do I work with her? What do I do? He said, you be grateful that she's your mother. She governs the cemetery, so you can go leave her an offering at the cemetery. And I said, okay. I said, do I need to set up an altar for her? Because that's what I did before. And he was like, just be grateful that she's um, your mother. And I said, okay. And so when I left that day, like he told me, he said, you've got something going on inside your body. He said, no amount of medical is going to fix it. He said, you need to receive your hand of Ifa. And I didn't understand what that meant. And he said, um, that means that Ifa is the only thing that can save you. And so I said, okay. He said, you need to give up dairy. You need to give up meat. You need to give up um, stress. You need to give up bending over and backwards for people. You need to stop being so complacent in your life. Those was his words to me. And so I said, okay. And so I left that day. And you would think that you would have more questions than answers, but for me, I had answers. Finally, I had answers. And so when I got back to the car, I told my ex-husband, I said, I need to get initiated. I need to receive the hand of Ifa. The hand of Ifa is the only thing that's going to save me. And he said, well, okay, let's do it. Now, mind you, at this point, I'm still sick. Um, I was, before I knew I was sick, I was 5'9" and 200 pounds. When I got sick, I was 185, 175, somewhere around in there. I had pretty much went back to my high school weight, which was around 175. And I couldn't fit any of my clothes. That's how much weight I had lost. And so I went back home. I started learning about Oya, and I started learning about Shango. I started learning about Oshun. I started learning about Aje. I just started digging into all of these different energies. And when I went back to my doctor, I remember we did the first um, surgical procedure where they scraped everything in my womb space. And I felt better for about 2 weeks, and then the bleeding started again. And then, and this was in August. I had been back and forth to the doctor's office every other week from August to October. At this point, we were close to, I want to say, 15, 15 or 16 surgical procedures, scraping my womb space or having ablations, which is when they send scorching hot water into your uterus to kill the lining and the cells in the uterus. Um, and yes, it's very painful. It is very, very painful. I woke up in the middle of one of the ablations and just I was hollering in pain because that's how painful it was. But I forgot one part. I was told when I was told that I had to receive the hand of Ifa, which is this bracelet right here. This is the hand of Ifa. When I received that, before I received that, I was told not to have the major surgery. Now I'm thinking that all of these surgeries are major surgeries, and I was wrong. Pretty much, I was wrong. So, um, when I went back, this was the 20th procedure, and this was in October. No, this was in November. This was in November of 2019. Was this in October or November 19th? Yes, it was because it was around the holiday. I had the final, not the final. This was the second to last final procedure. So she said they were coming back as much as we were doing the scraping and the ablations, they just kept coming back. And so I said, okay. Um, and so I told my ex at the time, I said, I can't have that last surgery. I didn't even know what the last surgery was. She said we were going to do another scraping. Um, I told him, I said, I can't do the last surgery until I receive my hand of Ifa. I need that before I can be initiated into, um, or before I can receive that surgery. So we went through the holiday, 2019. Again, no one knew anything. Only my ex and myself and the doctors knew. Um, this is at this time I reached out to um, the gentleman who I currently work with now, uh, in regards to getting this procedure done. Again, I don't know much at this point about Ifa. I know the deities in which I was given. I know that I need to receive my hand of Ifa. So I reach out to him and I tell him, well, I asked him, does he do the initiation? And he said yes. And so um, we are getting the whole process rolling. Um, we're meeting once a month, going over everything I need to know, making notes, getting divinations. All of my divinations are saying the same thing. You need to receive your hand of Ifa. And at this point, I'm still doing the ablations, which is the hot water going into your uterus. And this is scalding hot water. This water is hotter than the water in your house. Um, and so I'm doing those once a month. I'm being scraped every other month. No, every other week they're scraping. my uterus and my stomach lining. And I hadn't started chemo or anything like that. They put me on blood coagulants to stop the blood from pooling in my body. I was able to go back to work, and I worked that whole time up until October of 2020. I worked through the whole pandemic. Um, and so in 2020, my health was declining and I had to give up my job. So in October of 2020, I left the store management position because I could no longer do those long hours, long days, and I was tired. Um, but I'm also a person who can't sit still. I don't like to sit still. I have to be moving. It's just how I grew up. So I decided to go get another job, even though they told me I couldn't work. I was like, I cannot sit here and do nothing. So I went and got another job. Um, Ironically enough, it was a store manager position, and this one was for a furniture company. I don't know if you guys remember Big Lots, but that's the store. So I started working there in November. I was only there for a few weeks. My legs, I remember the night that I had to work. The closing manager did not show up. And so I had already been there since 6 o'clock in the morning. And my legs were starting to swell. I could feel them through my pants swelling. And I had a customer come in that wanted to pick up a couch. Now, you'd be like, oh, that's not that bad. You try moving 5 heavy boxes by yourself because the customer can't help you. And I'm in here struggling. And I remember the guy being like, are you the only person here that's doing this? And I was like, yes, unfortunately. So he was like, hold on, hold on. He was like, don't touch that. He was like, because if I can't get some help to come and get these couches, he was like, I'll come back and get them at another time. So he called, and um, 3 more gentlemen showed up. I showed them where the couches were, and they were like, you need to quit. Literally, because I was sitting with my feet up on the conveyor belt because I couldn't walk. They were like, you need to quit. They were like, you shouldn't be in here doing this work. This is not meant for you to be doing. And so I let them know. I said, typically, this is not my. I have a manager who works back here that's responsible, but he didn't show up. So today it's just me. And he was like, you still need to quit. I don't care. And but he got his people. They came and got the couches, and I remember going to my vehicle, laying with my feet up on my ceiling, so that the swelling could go down enough to where I could drive home. Thank goodness I was only 10 minutes away from my house. Um, so I was able to get home, but that was after like 2 hours of me laying in my vehicle with my feet on my ceiling to get the swelling to go down. I could have called somebody, but I wasn't going to leave my vehicle in a parking lot. And then, no, I wasn't going to do that. No, no, not going to do that. So uh, I drove home. And when I got home, I looked at my ex and I said, I can't work. And I was crying. I was in tears because I had worked through the pandemic, but the reality is that my body was shutting down. I was like, I need to have the surgery. And so um, in November, I went in for my ablation in 2020. I went in, no, that was 2019. So we're into, yeah, we are getting close to when I received my hand of EFI. So in November of 2019, I gave up working completely. I stayed home. We went to In December of 2019, we went to um, Idaho to celebrate the holiday with my ex's family. And while we were down there, nobody knew that I was as sick as I was. But when I got down there, I bought all my stuff for my altars and I set up an altar space in the closet. And when I would feel bad, because everybody's like, Where's Maria? She's not with us. And I was somewhere asleep in front of my altar space because I did not feel that good. I was swollen. Everything was swollen. Everything from my face to my hands to my feet, everything was swollen. So um I remember just laying in the closet on the floor doing my divination and consulting with the Baba who was going to be doing my initiation. And um, when they gave me the price, I was like, wow, this is more expensive than I thought it was going to be. My initiation was 3500 $3,500. And I was like, well, come hell or high water, I have to come up with this money. And this is why you never know what the universe is going to do for you. Because I was like, I don't work, I don't have any income other than my ex's income, and we have bills to pay. And so I have to come up with something. That was in December of 2019. In February of 2020, I was doing some work from home. I had a tax business and I was doing taxes from home. And someone asked me, they were like, did you file your taxes yet? And I was like, no. And they were like, well, you do taxes. Why don't you claim that as a business? And I was like, because I just do it because I'm good at it. And they were like, no, you need to claim it. And so I was like, okay. So I had gotten all my stuff together of what I did my taxes for. And ironically enough, I had another business that was already set up. And so I put this underneath as a subsidiary of the main business. And so I was able to get the money that I needed for my initiation. And because I did not know how I was going to do it because I had to have the surgery. In October of, no, yes, in October of 2020, I had the surgery. So when I did my taxes, I got everything that I needed for my um, hand of Ifa. So I let the Baba know I got the money, I'm ready, let's set it up. So I went in for my final ablation in August of 2020. At this point, we were 20 surgical procedures in, and nothing was helping. So I got my hand of E5 in October, and that's going to be part 4. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope my story helps someone. Um, because I'm just sharing how I started my spiritual journey and why I do what I do and why I love what I do. So if you liked this, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications so you're notified next time I upload part 4.